What happens when royal entitlement meets daytime television's most unforgiving host? You won't believe what unfolds when Prince Harry sits down with Whoopi Goldberg and the ladies of The View, thinking he can control the narrative like he does with his carefully orchestrated media appearances. This isn't your typical celebrity softball interview. This is a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral completely out of control when two massive egos refuse to back down. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses go head-to-head in what can only be described as the most explosive confrontation in daytime television history. The tension was palpable from the moment Prince Harry walked onto The View set, his usual confident stride betraying just a hint of nervousness as he surveyed the panel of hosts who had made careers out of dissecting public figures with surgical precision. Whoopi Goldberg sat center stage, her expression already skeptical as she shuffled through her notes, clearly preparing for what she anticipated would be another carefully rehearsed performance from the Duke of Sussex. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi began, her voice carrying that familiar edge that regular viewers know signals trouble ahead. "We're here with Prince Harry, who apparently has some thoughts about privacy while simultaneously writing tell-all books and doing Netflix documentaries." The audience shifted uncomfortably as Harry's jaw visibly tightened, his media-trained smile flickering for just a moment. Joy Behar jumped in with her characteristic lack of filter. "So Harry, help us understand. You want privacy, but you keep talking. It's like saying you're on a diet while eating cake on Instagram." The panel erupted in knowing laughter, but Harry's response revealed the first crack in his composed facade. "I think there's a difference between sharing your truth and having your privacy invaded," Harry replied, his voice carrying a defensive edge that hadn't been there moments before. "We've been very strategic about what we choose to share and when we choose to share it." Whoopi leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she sensed weakness. "Strategic? Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're playing both sides, wanting to be left alone while simultaneously putting yourself in the spotlight whenever it suits your narrative." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees as Harry's carefully constructed media persona began to show stress fractures. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair slightly tighter, and his voice took on that particular tone that royal watchers had learned to recognize as a warning sign. "Whoopi, with respect, I don't think you understand the unique pressures that come with being born into the institution I was born into," Harry said, his accent becoming more pronounced as his agitation grew. "The media attention, the constant scrutiny, the way every decision is analyzed and criticized by people who have never walked in my shoes." Sarah Haynes attempted to diffuse the situation with a gentler approach, but her question only seemed to irritate Harry further. "But Harry, surely you can understand why people might be confused by the mixed messages? You left the royal family, citing media intrusion, but then you've done Oprah, you've written a book, you have the Netflix series. Those were necessary," Harry interrupted, his voice rising slightly above the diplomatic tone he'd maintained throughout countless interviews. "Sometimes you have to control your own narrative before others control it for you. Sometimes you have to fight back against the lies and the manipulation." Whoopi's eyebrows shot up at the word lies, and her expression shifted from skeptical to openly confrontational. "Lies? Now hold on there, Prince. Are you suggesting that legitimate questions about your choices and contradictions constitute lies?" The studio audience was now completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something far more volatile than the typical celebrity interview. Harry's face flushed slightly, and for the first time since sitting down, he looked genuinely angry rather than just defensive. "I'm suggesting that there's a difference between legitimate journalism and the kind of harassment and invasion of privacy that my family has endured," Harry shot back, his voice carrying a sharpness that cut through the air like a blade. "And I'm suggesting that people who have never experienced what we've experienced shouldn't be so quick to judge our responses to it." Whoopi's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Oh, so now we're playing the you couldn't possibly understand card? Let me tell you something, Prince Harry. I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, and I've seen every kind of spin, every kind of manipulation, every kind of victim complex that exists." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Harry's eyes flashed with something that looked dangerously close to real anger. His media training was clearly warring with his instinct to fight back, and the careful balance he'd maintained throughout countless interviews was beginning to crumble. Victim complex? Harry repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet that somehow carried more menace than if he'd shouted. Is that what you call it when someone tries to protect their family from the same forces that contributed to their mother's death? The mention of Diana created an electric tension in the room, and Whoopi's expression hardened even further. She clearly wasn't going to be emotionally manipulated by the invocation of tragedy, and her response showed exactly why she'd earned her reputation as one of daytime television's most formidable personalities. Don't you dare try to use your mother's death as a shield for your own choices, Whoopi said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Your mother was a remarkable woman who handled her situation with grace and dignity, and what you're doing, this constant public airing of grievances, is nothing like what she did. The studio fell into absolute silence, and Harry's face went through a series of expressions that revealed just how deeply Whoopi's words had struck. His carefully maintained composure was cracking, and everyone in the room could sense that they were approaching a point of no return. But what happened next would prove that neither Whoopi nor Prince Harry was prepared to back down from this confrontation, setting the stage for an explosion that would leave everyone stunned. Harry's eyes blazed with an intensity that his carefully crafted public persona had never revealed before. The diplomatic mask he'd worn through countless interviews was completely gone now, replaced by raw emotion that seemed to surprise even him. "How dare you presume to tell me what my mother would have wanted?" he said, his voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "You didn't know her. You didn't live with the consequences of what the media did to her, and you certainly don't get to use her memory to attack me." Whoopi didn't flinch. If anything, Harry's emotional outburst seemed to energize her, like a boxer who'd found her opponent's weak spot and was preparing to exploit it ruthlessly. "I don't need to have known her personally to see what's happening here," she fired back, her voice gaining strength and authority. "What I see is someone who's turned his family tragedy into a brand, who's monetized his pain and then gets upset when people call him out on it." The other hosts exchanged glances, clearly recognizing that this had moved far beyond typical daytime television discourse into something much more personal and volatile. Sonny Hostin attempted to interject. "Maybe we should," but Harry cut her off with a sharp gesture. "A brand." Harry's laugh was bitter and cutting. "You think losing my mother, being forced to walk behind her coffin at 12 years old, watching the institution that was supposed to protect us fail her completely, you think that's a brand?" His voice cracked slightly on the words, revealing genuine pain beneath the anger, but Whoopi wasn't backing down. Her years in the entertainment industry had taught her to recognize manipulation in all its forms, and she clearly believed that's exactly what she was witnessing. "What I think," she said, leaning forward with predatory focus, "is that you're a grown man who's made millions of dollars telling the world how hard your privileged life has been, and now you're shocked that people aren't buying it anymore." The words hit Harry like physical blows, and his composure cracked completely. "Privileged," he spat, his voice rising to a level that made the studio audience visibly uncomfortable. "You want to talk about privilege? You're sitting here, making money off of criticizing people you've never met, people whose experiences you couldn't possibly comprehend, and you have the audacity to lecture me about privilege." Ana Navarro tried desperately to redirect the conversation. "Harry, I think what Whoopi is trying to say," but Harry was beyond hearing diplomatic interpretations. "No, let her speak for herself," Harry snapped, his eyes never leaving Whoopi's face. "She clearly has opinions about my life, my choices, my family. Let's hear all of it. Let's hear how someone who's never faced a fraction of what we've faced thinks we should have handled it." Whoopi's expression shifted into something that viewers who'd followed her career would recognize as dangerous territory. She'd built her reputation on not being intimidated by anyone, regardless of their status or background, and Harry's challenge had clearly triggered every confrontational instinct she possessed. "You want to hear all of it?" Whoopi's voice dropped to a low, menacing tone that somehow carried more threat than shouting. "Fine. Here's what I think. I think you're a spoiled brat who's never had to face real consequences for anything in his life. I think you married someone who filled your head with ideas about how unfairly you've been treated, And now you're both playing the victim while cashing checks that most people will never see in their lifetime. The studio fell into shocked silence. Even by the View's standards of provocative discussion, Whoopi had crossed into territory that felt dangerously personal. Harry's face went through a series of expressions: shock, hurt, and then a cold fury that seemed to settle over him like armor. "Meghan has nothing to do with this," Harry said, his voice now deadly quiet. Every word was enunciated with precision, like bullets being loaded into a chamber. "But since you brought her up, let's talk about how this very show has repeatedly attacked her, mocked her, questioned her integrity, all while pretending to support women and minorities. The hypocrisy is staggering." Joy Behar attempted to defend the show. "Harry, we've always been fair in our coverage," but Harry wasn't finished. "Fair?" Harry's laugh was harsh and humorless. "Is it fair to question someone's mental health struggles? Is it fair to suggest that someone's experiences with racism aren't valid? Is it fair to turn someone's pain into entertainment?" His voice was gaining momentum, years of suppressed frustration pouring out in a torrent. Whoopi had heard enough. She slammed her hand on the desk with enough force to make the coffee mugs jump, the sound echoing through the studio like a gunshot. "Don't you sit there and lecture us about fairness when you've spent years trashing your own family on international television," she roared, her composure finally cracking. "You want to talk about turning pain into entertainment? You literally wrote a book about your private family conversations. You put your brother's personal struggles on Netflix. And now you want to come here and play the victim?" Harry shot to his feet so quickly that his chair rolled backward, his face flushed with rage. "Those were my stories to tell. My experiences. My truth." The words came out in a rush, his carefully maintained royal bearing completely abandoned. "And unlike this show, unlike you, I didn't profit off of other people's misery. Your truth." Whoopi stood as well, matching his intensity with her own. "Your truth is that you've been given every advantage in life, and you're still not happy. Your truth is that you've had opportunities that billions of people would kill for, and you're standing here complaining because people won't just nod and smile while you rewrite history." The confrontation had reached a fever pitch that neither participant seemed able to control. The other hosts sat frozen, clearly recognizing that they were witnessing something that had moved far beyond television entertainment into genuine personal animosity. The studio audience was completely silent, as if afraid that any sound might escalate the situation further. At Harry's voice, when he spoke again, carried a cold finality that suggested he'd reached some kind of internal decision. "You know what, Whoopi? You're right about one thing. I am done playing the victim. I'm done sitting here and taking abuse from someone who clearly has no interest in having an honest conversation." But as Harry moved toward the edge of his seat, preparing to stand, Whoopi delivered what would prove to be the final, devastating blow that would make his departure inevitable. "You want to know what your real problem is, Harry?" Whoopi's voice cut through the tension like a blade, stopping him mid-motion. "Your problem is that you think being born into royalty makes you special. But the truth is, you're just another celebrity who can't handle criticism. The only difference is that most celebrities earn their fame. You inherited yours, and you've been coasting on it ever since." The words hit Harry with the force of a physical blow. His face went white, then flushed red with a fury so intense that even Whoopi seemed momentarily taken aback by the reaction she'd provoked. The other hosts watched in stunned silence as Harry's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Coasting." Harry's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried such venom that it seemed to fill the entire studio. "I served my country in Afghanistan. I've spent years working with veterans, with mental health charities, with people who actually need help. And you sit there, behind your desk, making jokes and passing judgment, and you want to tell me I'm coasting?" Whoopi wasn't finished. She could sense that she'd found the nerve that would end this confrontation once and for all, and she pressed her advantage with ruthless precision. "Oh, please, spare me the charity work speech. You do charity work because it makes you look good, because it gives you something to talk about in interviews like this. But when push comes to shove, when someone challenges you on your contradictions, you fall apart. Just like you're falling apart right now." Harry stood up abruptly, his chair clattering backward as he faced Whoopi with unconcealed rage. "You know what? You're absolutely right about one thing. I am done with this. I'm done with people like you who think you can say whatever you want without consequences. I'm done with this toxic environment where cruelty is disguised as entertainment. The studio audience began to murmur, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Joy Behar made one last attempt to salvage the situation. Harry, let's all just take a breath here. But Harry cut her off with a sharp gesture. No, Joy. There's no taking a breath here. There's no walking this back. Harry's voice carried a finality that silenced any further attempts at mediation. What just happened here proves exactly why my wife and I made the decisions we made. This is what we were trying to get away from. This mentality where tearing people down is considered acceptable as long as it gets ratings. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She'd gotten exactly the reaction she'd been pushing for, and she wasn't about to let Harry have the last word. Oh, so now we're the problem? Not you. Not your constant need for attention. Not your inability to handle even the mildest criticism without falling apart. It's everyone else's fault. Harry's laugh was bitter and harsh. You call that mild criticism? You've spent the last 20 minutes attacking everything about my life, my family, my choices, my wife, my mother's memory, and you want to call that mild? His voice rose with each word, the careful elocution lessons of his youth completely abandoned. I call it asking the questions that everyone else is thinking but too polite to ask. Whoopi shot back, her own voice rising to match his intensity. I call it holding you accountable for your actions instead of just nodding along while you rewrite history to make yourself look better. Sarah Haynes made a desperate attempt to redirect. Maybe we can find some common ground here. But Harry was already reaching for his microphone, his movements sharp and angry. Common ground. Harry's voice dripped with disdain as he unclipped his mic with hands that were visibly shaking with rage. There's no common ground with someone who thinks cruelty is a virtue. There's no common ground with someone who profits off of other people's pain and then acts self-righteous about it. Whoopi stood up as well, clearly not content to let Harry have the moral high ground as he prepared to leave. You want to talk about profiting off pain? You literally wrote a best-selling book about your family drama. You made a Netflix series about how hard your life is. And now you're standing there acting like you're above it all. Harry paused in his preparation to leave, turning back to face Whoopi with an expression of such contempt that several audience members gasped audibly. The difference, Whoopi, is that those were my stories to tell. My experiences. My truth. You're making money off of attacking other people's truths, other people's pain, and you don't see the difference because you've been doing it for so long that you think it's normal. Normal. Whoopi's voice reached a crescendo that echoed through the studio. You want to know what's normal? Normal is people who work real jobs, who face real problems, who don't have the luxury of flying to California to complain about their problems on Oprah. Normal is people who don't get to write books and make millions when life gets tough. Harry's response came with a cold finality that signaled the end of any possibility of reconciliation. And there it is. That's exactly the attitude that made it impossible for my family to stay. That's the mentality that turns human beings into entertainment, that treats other people's struggles as content for your show. Ana Navarro made one final attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. Harry, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. But Harry was already backing away from the panel, his microphone clutched in his hand like a weapon he was preparing to discard. There's no misunderstanding, Harry said, his voice now steady and controlled, as if he'd moved beyond anger into something colder and more resolute. This conversation has been exactly what I expected it would be. This is why we left. This is why we chose a different path. And this is why I won't be subjecting myself or my family to this kind of treatment anymore. Whoopi wasn't content to let him leave without one final shot. Oh, so you're running away again? Just like you ran away from your royal duties. Just like you ran away from your family responsibilities. When things get tough, Prince Harry runs. Harry stopped dead in his tracks, turning back to face the panel one final time. The studio fell into absolute silence, everyone sensing that whatever Harry said next would be the definitive end to this confrontation. You're right, Whoopi. I am running. I'm running from people who think cruelty is entertainment. I'm running from environments where attacking someone's mental health struggles is considered fair game. I'm running from the kind of toxic behavior that contributed to my mother's death, and I'm not apologizing for it." With that, Harry dropped his microphone onto his chair with a gesture of such finality that the sound echoed through the stunned studio like a gavel. He turned and walked toward the exit with purposeful strides, ignoring the producers who scrambled to intercept him. Whoopi called after him, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Prince." But Harry didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the comment, didn't give her the satisfaction of a response. The studio doors swung shut behind him with a decisive thud, leaving the panel and audience in stunned silence. Whoopi sat back down, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and something that might have been regret, while the other hosts exchanged glances that spoke volumes about what they'd just witnessed. The cameras continued rolling, capturing the aftermath of what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about confrontations in daytime television history. The audience sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd just seen, while the producers frantically worked to figure out how to transition to commercial break after such an explosive ending. In the end, both Whoopi and Prince Harry had gotten exactly what they deserved, a confrontation that revealed the worst aspects of both their personalities, broadcast live for the world to see. The prince had stormed off, his dignity in tatters, while the host sat victorious but somehow diminished by the cruelty she'd displayed. It was a perfect encapsulation of everything wrong with both celebrity culture and daytime television. Two massive egos colliding in spectacular fashion, leaving nothing but wreckage in their wake.